So I recorded this session with my friend Dana on April 7th. It was about disaster loan relief in the time of coronavirus. And just a few days after we recorded our episode, the loan money ran out. So I figured this episode was fit for recycling. But as of today, April 24th, Congress just passed a second round of disaster loan funding. So if you're interested in finding out more about what's a PPP loan, why should your organization consider applying for one or not, stay tuned. I had a little bit of trouble with my audio equipment for this recording. So with that caveat, let's get started.
Welcome to Charity Therapy, a podcast about building better nonprofits. I'm your host, Jess Birken. Hey, Dana.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm good. Very good. How are you?
I'm feeling somewhat relieved because I just submitted a Paycheck Protection Program loan application to one of my banks. So I'm feeling slightly fewer heart palpitations. Thanks for being with me today on the podcast. Share with everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do.
My name is Dana DeZiel, and I own and am the managing director of the Minneapolis location of Supporting Strategies. We provide bookkeeping and controller services to small businesses and not-for-profit organizations.
Right on. And that is why you are the best person to be here today, because all I have done since March 27th is sit around and try and figure out what the hell is going on with these disaster loans. I feel like my whole life has turned into just trying to research what these things are. And I know, I applied for that economic injury disaster loan, the EIDL, right away. And they promised to send an emergency advance within 3 days. And that was, 10 days ago, and there's still nothing in my bank account. So right. The loan process has been very frustrating. And I think it might be helpful for people if we just sort of talk about what are these loans?
Yep, absolutely. So there's a couple different options out there. The EIDL loans that you already mentioned, which was the first program that came out that small businesses could apply immediately and get like a $10,000 advance. And you've already explained your frustration with that process. And then the second wave that came through is the Paycheck Protection loans, the PPP loans, as we're calling them. And me and all of my fellow associates were all sitting around waiting for the official guidance to come out last Thursday night at 10 o'clock before the banks could go live on Friday morning.
Yeah, so that's kind of unique to this particular disaster. And the economic injury disaster loans, those have been there for a long time, right? Like if your business got hit by a hurricane or a tornado or some other disaster, the Small Business Administration loan program has existed for many, many years. And so it's that Paycheck Protection Program one that seems very vexing because it's so new, and even the EIDL loans that have a special twist to them now since the CARES Act was passed, they're just being inundated with applications at this point. I think they're a little overloaded. Could you maybe talk from your perspective as a professional, why would your clients want one of these loans?
Well, the nice thing about the loans is that they do promise some forgiveness at the end of the loan term. So part of the proceeds won't need to be paid back based on maintaining certain salary levels and hiring employees, or actually keeping employees on during the whole epidemic that we're going through.
Yeah, so my understanding is sort of that the economic injury disaster loans, that's just a straight up low interest loan. They do provide, theoretically, this, small emergency advance that doesn't need to be paid back, but it's basically a low interest loan to get your business back on your feet. Whereas the PPP loans, are actually forgivable to the extent that you spend that money on payroll, rent, and utilities and things like that in the first 2 months. Like they're really just trying to give you 2 months worth of payroll and overhead expenses so that we keep the economy going, people employed, rents paid.
Correct. Now, 75% of the loan proceeds need to be spent on payroll costs, which is to encourage you to keep your employees on. Now, one of the things that recently, a question that I've gotten is, why would I want one? I don't have any work for my employees to do. I think kind of the spirit behind it is, if you do keep those employees on, even though you don't have work for them to do, maybe there's something they can do for the community. So they're still being paid. You would be forgiven for the payroll costs, and then they can maybe donate time to, help distribute food or do some other good work that will help us during the crisis.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I'm like, what do you mean you don't have work for people to do? Like, I get it if they are in a very specific job, like, driving a delivery van or something like that. But I'm sorry, as a small business owner, man, I have an unlimited pile of crap I am trying to get done at any given time, even if that's just organizing file folders. And there is a ton of, I hope I'm never slow enough to actually do all those things on my list. But I'm sure there are things that we can have people do, even if it's not in our mind as like part of their current job description. But I think there is a case to be made that maybe those loans are not appropriate for some businesses and nonprofits, the PPP loans especially. Can you speak to that? Like, why would you not want one of these loans?
If you have any hesitancy that you wouldn't think that you're going to be able to quickly rehire employees.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing for me is, if you're already struggling or you think that you won't be able to keep your workforce at that 90% level throughout the entire time period that the loan requires, the answer isn't necessarily to go into more debt and take out loans to make it. So I think there are organizations and businesses out there where it's like, this probably isn't a good commitment for you to make. And granted, all you're sacrificing is the forgivable aspect. I've definitely been talking to a lot of other lawyers right now, and some of them are like, almost, who cares if it's forgivable? Because if I can borrow money to keep going at 1% interest, that's still worth it to me. For some nonprofits, I can see where taking on debt is maybe not a good idea if you don't think you can reasonably make it through the next 6 to 8 months anyway.
Correct.
Okay, so, maybe it makes some sense to talk about who can apply, because a lot of the questions that I've been getting are all over the place. People are really confused. First of all, people don't know that these loans exist or that they can actually be qualified for them. And then people are really confused about whether their particular kind of nonprofit can qualify, or if their business can qualify because they're a sole proprietor, or they don't actually have W-2 employees, all of those things. So can we talk a little bit about who can apply for these loans?
Right, absolutely. So small businesses under 500 employees, including and nonprofit organizations that have payroll, can apply for the loans.
Right on. And that sounds too easy. So I think that's where people are like, yeah, but that doesn't really mean me. So I think it's important to say,
right,
this really means you. Like if you're less than 500 employees, this means you.
It does. It's a huge, very broad, application there. There's not a ton of guidance beyond that. I think we're still waiting for some things to come out. There's still Q&A coming out as people are asking questions about whether, if they're affiliated, are they still eligible? And I think as we move forward, some of those questions will still be answered. I think when you bring things out quickly, not every aspect can be looked at before it comes out. I think the big thing was to get this out quickly and make it available. and then deal with some of the unique aspects that in the questions that are going to come up as they come up.
Yeah, that raises an interesting point just because there are almost like, I don't want to say more unknowns than knowns at this point, but there are so many unresolved questions. Like, what does the forgiveness process look like? What would the loan terms look like? And it's like, I just keep, talking to clients saying, well, we just don't know yet.
Right.
We just don't know. It's new. I haven't seen a copy of the loan terms. I don't know what that forgiveness process looks like. I don't know what sort of documentation you're going to need to cough up. I don't know what it means to maintain your workforce at 90% through the time period. Like, is it number of hours or number of bodies? Like, there are a lot of sort of mysterious components to this, which I think makes people a little gun shy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even in the accounting community, we were all kind of batting around. Is it full-time equivalent? Is it number of employees? What is it, what does that mean? Is it level of employee? If you have 100 employees and 95 of them are, 5 are executive employees and 95 are lower level employees, and then you mix that up and your payroll changes to, what does that mean? So there's a lot of that. The one thing that they did come out with for sure is that, as I've been talking to the banks, that they're not focused on full-time equivalents, that the applications I've been helping my clients with, the banks are saying, just tell us the number of employees, period. They haven't been asking about full-time equivalents at all.
Yeah. It's interesting, just having even completed the PPP loan application today, that first phase, they don't really ask you for documentation. They just ask you for the numbers and some preliminary data. And I assume there will be a documentation request that comes. So the whole process feels, and the EIDL streamline application is very much the same, right? It takes about 5 minutes. I made like a YouTube walkthrough for nonprofits that takes you through each whole thing. It's not that complicated if you know what you're doing, but it's like, that can't be it, right? Like, where's the rest of the application?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the banks aren't asking for any necessarily upfront documentation. They're asking that you compile it, but there's, not really a clear-cut list as to what to compile. It's helpful. I know all the major payroll processors have come out with COVID-related reports. So I think those will be helpful going forward. And I think everybody's going to really be relying on the payroll community to help track, as payroll's paid and as it's related to the loans. We'll be using the payroll processors to keep track of that, to help us with that.
Yeah, and I know, just like with everything, all of this is so new. I've been talking to folks they're using Gusto, and they were like, oh, this is so great. There's like a report you can run. And then 48 hours later, one of them was like, the report was actually wrong. It didn't cap employees with compensation over $100,000. You need to go back in and rerun the report because they fixed it. So while it's great that some of these software companies are putting out like easy push the button, generate the report, you do want to double check that your report is correct. And that if you ran it 3 days ago, that they haven't like actually updated the calculations and you should run it again, just to make sure that it's got the most correct information in there.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think a lot of nonprofits are really trying to maximize the forgiveness portion of the PPP loans. So if you're really trying to only take out a loan for the amount that's going to be forgivable, that's pretty important.
Yeah, it is. Clearly says that the lender is going to have to make a decision within 60 days of the loan as to what portion of the loan will be forgivable. Nobody really knows what that looks like. So that's the other scary piece. If you don't know if you need the loan and you're not sure that you're going to have the payroll, and now we don't know how much is going to be forgiven or how that's going to be calculated. I mean, I could see why people, might just say, you know what, as long as I'm going to make it through, I think I'm good.
It's been sort of a struggle bus getting the PPP loans going, especially. I think the next logical question is, okay, I want to get one of these disaster loans for my business or this nonprofit that I'm with. How do I get one? Well,
Right. Yeah, a lot of the banks have opted out altogether. So you have a whole group of banks that just said, you know what, it's not worth it for us, and we don't have the manpower to do it, so we're not doing it at all. The first thing I would do for an organization is just tell them to speak with their local bank, the bank that they do business with. I actually spoke to two small regional banks this morning, and they have said that they've backed off completely at this point, where it was open for anybody to apply, and they had so many applications that they've come back and said, you know what, we're going to have to process the ones for our customers first and make decisions about those before we look at processing applications from organizations and businesses that we don't already have a relationship with.
That is creating a strange wrinkle. And that's not just even local banks, that's Wells Fargo is doing that. I bank there, and actually they're saying that they have so much interest that they aren't even necessarily going to be able to lend to all of their own customers because they have some capital limitations. So if you bank with a credit union that's not an SBA approved lender, that isn't participating in these, or your small local or regional bank isn't participating in the program, and that's where you do your banking, and then you're trying to look around for a lender to work with that you don't have a pre-existing banking relationship with, and all of the banks are basically saying you need to already be an existing customer with a business banking account. I've seen, banks that are saying you have to have an account active with us back on February 15th. I've seen banks that are saying we're only processing loan applications for people that have some existing credit relationship with us, whether that's a credit card or a line of credit or a loan. That one really torques me off because it's supposed to be like no guarantee, no credit application required, but they're effectively making it we already know you have good credit because we've lent to you before. So that one's particularly annoying to me. But I think there are a lot of people who are feeling like their business or nonprofit is being kind of left out in the cold right now, and they don't exactly know where to go. And there's this feeling of this money isn't going to cover every small business entity in the US. So where does that leave all of those folks?
Right. And even if you do have a banking relationship, nobody knows whether they're going to get the loans. So it is leaving uncertainty. And how do you keep your employees on that you really do want to keep employed and be able to pay them through this? And now you don't even know if you're going to get a loan to do that. So now are you putting yourself in debt while you're waiting to find out whether you can get a loan, or even if there's a borrower out there that you can utilize at this point?
Yeah, so if folks out there know, maybe some financial tech companies that are offering SBA lending right now. I know Divvy is one. If you're familiar with Divvy, they are spinning up. They've got a relationship with a bank, and they're taking folks that participate in their software as, hey, come apply through this process. And I don't know if you know of any others, but certainly if you hear of any, you can let me know, and I'll post them in the show notes for people, because I think it's something that's making people a little bit panicky right now, that they know they should be doing this and they can't, or they feel like they can't, or they're just like, where do I go? What do I do?
Right. Yeah.
I'm holding out some hope that, this program might be expanded, more money might be dumped into it. We're not totally sure that won't happen. So
yeah,
I really appreciate you coming short notice to kind of spend some time with me on this. I think it's super important, and it's really critical for small nonprofits, especially, to understand that they do qualify for these loans and that there are resources out there to help you out through this time. Dana, I imagine there are a lot of groups out there that might, be keeping their financials on an Excel sheet, or are having a hard time pulling together their payroll calculations because maybe their books aren't as tidy as they ought to be. Where can people that are in that situation find you and reach out to get some advice about how to clean up their financials?
Absolutely. So you can go to the Supporting Strategies website and just go to my location page, which is the Minneapolis. My office number is 612-248-1694. I'd be happy to talk to anybody, and they don't have to be my client. I am really just willing to help.
Very good. If you are trying to roll up your payroll calculations, or you've got other questions about how to muddle through this mess with your financials and loan applications, reach out to myself, reach out to Dana. We are all out here to support you. Best of luck with your loan applications, everybody. All right, folks, that's our show. Be sure to follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Jess Birken. We want to hear from you. Send us a message at our website, charitytherapy.show. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at birkenlaw.com/signup. Charity Therapy is a production of Birken Law Office, PLLC. Our theme song is by Whalehawk. And remember, folks, this podcast is produced for your entertainment and is not a substitute for actual legal advice.